All right. It says we're live. Today I'm with Deacon Dawit, let's just say of the North for now, from an undisclosed location.
The North
And
Pole.
he's looking great today. My brother, welcome back to this program. But I know you have another program on your mind. You want to share with the good folks what is on your mind?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been on my mind for a bit, but it's still a work in progress. I'm thinking, God willing, we will, or whoever's willing to participate on some sort of consistent platform for addressing the needs of the time and the controversies, if necessary, the issues of the time, basically, and seeing it from our perspective. Not just from a Ethiopian or from an Orthodox Tewahedo perspective, but from all those things that make uh, myself who I am, and probably have a lot in common with the audience, God willing, who would start subscribing to it. So, from an Ethiopian, obviously, because I'm Ethiopian, Orthodox, but also born and raised in, or born in Ethiopia, raised in America, as millions of people are. So, that's the goal, man. Discussing the issues of the time in a consistent basis for anyone and everyone, willing to give it a perspective.
That's good. That's good. So I've got the trending Twitter topics up just to see if we can give people the tiniest of samples. We'll go more in depth in on other occasions when we gather together to do this, but just to give people kind of a mini flavor. I'll give you an option. Do you want to go with something from the DC universe or with sports?
From the DC universe, like Marvel and DC.
Yeah. Or do you want to go with sports? I'll give you. I can
Okay,
give you either one. I'll let you choose
let's
your own
try.
journey.
Okay, let's do DC, man.
All right, so DC today, and they're definitely not paying us, but Wonder Woman 1984 comes out. I have heard that it's going to be released in some limited theaters, but mainly probably people are going to access it through streaming on HBO Max and streaming by other means. As we know, the internet is undefeated. What are your thoughts either on streaming shows in general or Wonder Woman specifically? Are you excited to watch this film? Have you seen any of the other Wonder Woman films or any of the related DC films, or take it any which way you want in terms
Yeah.
of analysis of this from an Ethiopian or a Christian or a human perspective?
Yeah, from Dawit's perspective, I guess I could say, even though I don't represent any of those organizations officially, in well, in certain ways, in different ways, but from my perspective personally, I would say it's an entertainment piece, but it's also a messaging tool. Obviously, entertainment, especially mainstream, big screen, multi-million-dollar entertainment, is not just for entertainment. It's a business. It's not just a business. It's a tool for shaping the minds of people different ways. Not in some huge conspiracy at all, but money and entertainment has always been from the ancient times a way of influencing the populace. Right? They had the Roman. What are they called? The arenas where they had gladiator fights, and then they had I think it was Justinian who had that same kind of uh, problem when the blues and the greens would attack, and these were groups of sports commentators and sports enthusiasts who eventually became the biggest political parties of the Roman Empire. So, when that became such an influential group, I'm sure future generations saw the potential of industry or industrial size entertainment. And so that's one of my perspectives on that. But also Marvel and the stories of its mythology, tracing back to African mythology. I don't know if you followed some of those coincidences or connections, but a lot of the Marvel characters, or is it Marvel or DC or who cares? But a lot of those characters are connected to mythology in West Africa, particularly.
Yeah, I've seen it from. It seems like from everything, right? I believe it's a Marvel show. one I recently saw on the Greek gods and Hercules and Zeus and all that on Netflix. I'm forgetting the name of it right now off the top of my head, but Marvel also draws on the Norse mythology, various West African, sometimes even in the Horn of Africa. I remember studying some of the early Aksumite period recently, and famously, Ethiopian has the Christian kingdom in the 300s. But if you look right before that period, Aksum was a pagan kingdom for a few centuries, and during that time, the Greek language was written on the currency, and it seems like there was a cult around the god of Mars, and that itself could have entered Greece from the Near East, from the Semitic world, and potentially from Africa too. There was a lot of what do they call it, the marketplace of ideas and the intercourse of ideas going around, the same way in which Christianity and Islam enter into the Horn of Africa in the first place is through these merchants from the Near East in the first place, crashing on our shores of the Red Sea, and coming to make some money to sell their wares of various sorts. When I see these DC movies and these Marvel movies, what I am increasingly convinced of is that people thirst for the gods. I recently read and reviewed this book, which calls itself an exhortation. Other people call it a treatise, called "The Bronze Age Mindset" by the Bronze Age pervert. And what's one of the most fascinating features of the book, which kind of exalts piracy and a lot of these other very pre-Christian ideals, is a kind of quasi endorsement of paganism in clear language. And that's rare nowadays to see, but increasingly pops up. I know whenever the Times wants to send some reviving Wiccan or witch article, I usually send it over to you to show you, like, people are really trying to enter into witchcraft, and it shows you the dryness of secularism, that secular humanism can last very few generations before it delves into either postmodernism or directly into what I think inevitably Father Seraphim Rose wrote about, it delving into nihilism or meaninglessness. Is there a danger, or is it an innocent joy, the kind of the popular loving of these films?
Well, I think it's both, definitely, and it's funny that you bring up Seraphim Rose. I just downloaded a few of his books. I've been trying to follow and read up on it, but I hadn't, started officially reading his books. And although he's following the same line of some of the other books and authors that I follow and have really digested, I think he was really right on, on the point about nihilism and the religion of the future. But I think it's dangerous. To answer your question, there is danger in the trend, even though people are not trying necessarily. The majority of people are not trying to become pagan, as you were saying, but it's more they are trying to be open-minded, or trying to be free for all religions, or free and open thinking of all philosophies. That's fine, but there's truth and there's one certain reality at the same time. So people are trying to be scientific, but also pluralists, and those don't go hand in hand. You can be scientific and Christian, because those are science is an attempt to understand the truth, and Christianity is the revelation of the truth through Christ. So those two things happen. But right now, for example, when we're Christians celebrating Christmas, there is both of those polarities. It can be dangerous to celebrate it as a commercialized, trend and just the Christmas tree celebration, and it can be rewarding to express the joy of Christ's incarnation through this season. And within this season, I was watching these Christmas masses. The Catholic Church does, especially, Christmas being, in some definitions, the Mass for Christ, the celebration, the liturgical celebration. And here in Sacramento or in other places around the world, they do these midnight celebrations. So there's both, and it depends on your intent as you're following it. But it's never going to be a it's not going to be an if and or option when it comes to the truth, though. So there's a way in expressing the truth in multiple different venues, possibly, but there's still one single truth. So yeah, that's how I'm seeing it.
Merry Christmas, by the way, according to the
Day
Western calendar or the Western communities of Christians. Yeah, I like your answer. My great teacher, Father Paul Nadim Tarazi, loves the word functionality. And I like that word too, because it's something that I use in the strength training world. They talk about functional training exercises. It's something we find from Amharic adages or sayings that I tend to actually go against. The common Amharic adage says "kafutfutu fitu," rather than the content of the food called futfut, which is kind of like injera, our nice stiff sourdough bread mashed up with tomato sauce. Rather than the quality of the food, I care more about the face of the person, meaning the presentation. And I usually feel the opposite. And I say usually kafitu futfutu. I'd rather have super quality food and not care if you frown at me as you give it to me, as long as you have bomb food. And that's the idea of functionality over form.
Yeah.
Function over form is the reverse saying in the Anglo-Saxon tradition. So functionality is good because people try to pin you down. Are you for Christmas or against Christmas? And you're saying, well, it depends. What is the context of the celebration of the Christmas? It reminds me of the great prophet Hosea amongst the scroll of the 12, the minor prophets at the end of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. Hosea has this terrifying line. He has many terrifying lines, but one of his terrifying lines that I always remember and worry about when we do mass gatherings is he says, as their number increased, so did their sins. Their sins multiplied. And it's like, we can be 10,000 people who claim to be Orthodox Christians, but if we're all living lives of whitewashed tombs or whitewashed walls of hypocrisy, that gathering is kind of an external worship of God with the lip service that Isaiah speaks of, rather than a genuine circumcision of the foreskins of our hearts, as it's prescribed in Deuteronomy.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, if we're touching on the hypocrisy and when whitewashism, which it definitely relates to the cultures and the celebrations. There's an external presentation of something, and then there's the internal identity. And what is the identity of Christmas? What is the definition that people ascribe to those celebrations? What do they ascribe to movie or entertainment? And finally, how do they describe themselves, or what are they themselves? Obviously identity politics and all that is a huge concern for people, and that's a concern for the church as Orthodox Christians. How do we identify, or what do we identify ourselves as? Do we identify by our external circumstances, or our external dramatization? Even though that's also important, there was a quote from Alexander Schmemann, the liturgical scholar, and he said, there is beauty. I put it on somewhere. I think I quoted it on my Facebook once. And we're intentionally trying to make things very beautiful and make things very ornamental, and not because it's by itself of value, but just as you would make something ornamental for a guest visiting you or for someone's birthday. This is all a show of beauty for the guest or for the person of honor in our midst. And as Christians, we make things beautiful, and we look at the external aspect of things because we want, that's the first step into the internal world. So yeah, the way we dress, the way we organize, the architecture of the churches, those all give a view of the internal world, and they both have to be aligned. Not necessarily one being more important than the other, even though that's the case sometimes with people thinking, oh, it's more important how I am on the inside than on the outside. That creates a division. What we are on the inside is what should be on the outside. Because if we divide those two separate and make them separate things, then we're developing two different identities in a way.
What do you make of, and this could be a much longer topic, but I would like to close out on this, either the situation in America with the current regime change that is going on from President Donald Trump to President-elect Joe Biden, or with the news we keep hearing every day of minorities of the so-called Benishangul region of Ethiopia. While it seems this situation in the north in Tigray is close to wrapping up, but not 100% wrapped up, minorities are being killed. And I've read some reports, I don't know how accurate, of even cannibalism in that region, beginning with the livers of the people that they're killing with poison-tipped bow and arrows in 2020, in the year of our Lord. Either of those issues, if you want to give us a gursha of either one of those or both.
Yeah, it's natural. It's the natural man's works. You know, the Father Matthew the Poor talks about the natural, the creative, or the creaturely. What's that?
Al-Miskin.
Yes, yeah, Matthew al-Miskin, or Miskinu Mattheos. He talks about the creational or creative, not creative, which is what we're trying to do, be creative in this format, but the creaturely, I guess, is the definition he described it, and then the natural or the carnal man, and then the spiritual man. And it's without Christ or without truth or without becoming spiritual through the Holy Trinity, man is that way. You know, bows and arrows have been around for millennia, and that's how natural man acts, right? I mean, it's a weapon of it's a symbol of carnal humanity, the bow and arrow. So it's interesting how vulgar and explicit people are choosing to be in these times when access to real ammunition in Ethiopia is common, right? You've seen pictures of people with AK-47s, or not AKs, but these old
AKs, AKs in music videos. This Protestant Facebook friend of mine recently was commenting that Ethiopians tell him to go visit Ethiopia all the time, and then he sees AK-47s in the music videos, and he's like, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, the music videos and the farmers, man. They got the Kalashnikov, the Russian ammunitions in their neighborhoods just to herd sheep. And so, you know, with access to that kind of weaponry, people are using bows and arrows. And you know, in some ways, it's a sign of how reversed or backwards people are choosing to become, or at least choosing to express themselves. Although I disagree with the whole international perspective of developed or undeveloped countries and what that really means behind the people speaking in that way. You know, I studied international relations, and one of the courses I took was on East African politics and East African cultural anthropology of East Africa. And the major problem is also how the world sees these countries that are monetarily or financially or economically in a situation, and not only how they see it, but how they impact and influence the world there, the East African world. So it has a lot of connections. It's not just an Ethiopian situation. It's not just a Benishangul situation. It's one human, and it's also international politics that are influencing that. Whether it's the Kalashnikovs from Russia or the interests of the Egyptians for the Nile, or if it's the Ethiopian different political parties or ethnic parties based on some rudimentary law about splitting by ethnic segregation and ethnic federalism, which again it's easy to look at it and say, oh, this is just undeveloped people or undeveloped initiatives. It's not as simple as that, and I can't obviously define it on my own with the limited bachelor's degree in international relations, but I think it deserves attention. Hopefully we'll be giving it attention more and more, but I'm glad that it's explicitly defined or easy to define as such a vulgar and offensive action, whereas before it was much more covert types of murders and the types of violence done to Ethiopians, amongst Ethiopians and in Ethiopia. So God willing, we can discuss it, but also be some perspective of light for it in that channel that I was thinking we could discuss on.
Yeah, and we'll announce it, once it's fully launched. We're just giving people kind of a preview of what's to come. In closing, at least on my end, it's a mind meld. It's mind boggling. It's a mind F that what is going on is you have someone like President-elect Joe Biden and his close people to him. I'm forgetting one of the guys' names, but Susan Rice is one of the women close to him, who a lot of progressive Ethiopians look at and they love him domestically because they have this hatred of President Donald Trump. But when it gets to the Ethiopian situation, you mentioned the Egyptians. Who's out there meddling with the Egyptians? Who's out there supporting the TPLF terrorists as their, the law enforcement operation is going on, or civil war, however you want to call it, to round them up? It's Susan Rice and Joe Biden and all the people close to Joe Biden who are actually super anti-Ethiopian. Then you have someone like Donald Trump, who, if you're not Machiavellian and you take things at face value, you can get alarmed by his rhetoric about threatening to blow up the dam. And you may hate his domestic policies in the United States. And yet, if your number one priority is what is his relationship to Ethiopia, you look at his man, Mike Pompeo, one of them alphabet boys, again, that we're trained not to like. Mike Pompeo is actually supportive of His Eminency, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali of Ethiopia right now. He's actually supporting the current regime change that is lifting the boot that has been on the people, for some people for 30 years and other people close to 50 years. And so it's fascinating seeing the tension and the dichotomy set up between the foreign policy of some of these people and the domestic policy, and what are the priorities that people have when they are assessing these issues, and with what type of nuance can you then make statements of analysis of those situations. Any lasting thoughts before we close out here to plug the new channel you're going to be launching soon, and I'm going to be working with you?
Well, yeah, man. I mean, I hope you can just reiterate that it is, like you said, very nuanced, very complicated, and it deserves attention and detail. Obviously, it's not definable in one segment or one discussion, but some of the things are becoming obvious. Like you said, the international connections, but more importantly, the essential definitions, the essential identity markers that are showing up in this kind of violence. Whenever there's violence against another person, it's not obviously Christian, it's not spiritual. Well, and even that is a bit nuanced because of defense and soldiers that were saints. So it deserves a lot of conversation. How do we appropriately, and what is not just the Christian, but as Christianity is pointing towards the truth in our perspective, what is the true and right way to address, for example, a bombing of a military base by a group, TPLF,
a regional government,
yeah. Yeah, and what is the proper way to address arrow shooting people in other parts of the world? So yeah, I think it deserves a lot of discussion. Hopefully we can have input by a variety of people, and and it can be consistent because it's happening every day, and very few people know how to see this or know how to express what they see from about this situation. Not just situations in Ethiopia, but situations for humanity. What is humanity turning into, or what is the goal for humanity? And especially during this season, this Christmas, this Advent or Christmas season, where we're seeing the incarnation, the perfect human, perfect man. What does it mean to become human? Is kind of also, I think, something that deserves attention and conversation for a long time.
Agreed, brother. And I just want to say that even nuance takes nuance. And what I mean by that, to not make it too meta and abstracted, is that we have dogmas from the church. We don't have dogmas from political society. There we're functional and flexible. And so even when it comes to nuance, for example, when we're discussing cannibals in Northwest Ethiopia, what we're saying is we're not going to sit here and debate cannibalism. If you're not pro-human enough, and if you're so multicultural that you want to say, oh, you know what? What's wrong with that? If that's their tradition, let it be their tradition. We're not that open. We're coming from a pro-human perspective and kind of a basic, Judeo-Christian worldview. At the very basic. Within that, we're ready for nuance, context, and flexibility. So you can look out for that. And we don't know how frequently we'll do it, but we'll try to be frequent in 2021. And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. God bless you all. Thank you, Henok.